Okay, let's dive into a real puzzle. We're talking about Costa Rica. Now, think about its neighborhood, a region that's often been defined by conflict. And yet, there's this one country that's a stable democracy, a pioneer in conservation, and get this, it doesn't even have an army. The big question is, how did they pull that off?
You see, this wasn't some happy accident. It was the result of a series of really radical choices. Choices born from poverty, from sudden wealth, and even from war. So that brings us to the core of our story today. How on earth did one small nation make one of the most audacious decisions of the 20th century to literally trade its army for an education?
You know, when we think of Costa Rica, we probably think of pura vida, right? The pure life. But to really get a grip on its unique journey, we've got to look past that peaceful postcard image. We need to dig into a really complex history that, believe it or not, starts with total neglect.
Yeah, so the name Costa Rica, rich coast, talk about false advertising. Sure, Columbus was impressed by some gold trinkets he saw, but the reality? It was completely different. In fact, a Spanish governor back in 1719 called it the most forgotten backwater of the entire empire.
And this is where the story gets really interesting. It's what we could call the paradox of poverty. There was no gold, and, tragically, the indigenous population had been decimated, so there wasn't a big labor force for the Spanish to exploit. This meant that the settlers, even the governor himself, had to get their hands dirty and farm their own land. And this shared hardship, kind of by accident, created a society of small independent farmers. It was actually more equal than pretty much anywhere else in the Spanish Empire.
But, you know, that early equality, it didn't last. In the 19th century, it was completely shattered by a single crop, a crop that would totally reshape the nation's destiny. And with all that new wealth came, well, immense division.
And that crop? It was coffee. They called it the grano de oro, the grain of gold. The volcanic soil of the Central Valley was just perfect for it. And when a direct shipping route to London opened up in 1843, it was like a fire hose of European money just blasted into the country. This created a whole new oligarchy of coffee barons, the cafetaleros, and they would go on to dominate the country for the next 100 years.
And the shift was just so dramatic. That old society of small landowners was pretty much replaced by a deeply stratified one. These cafetaleros bought up huge pieces of land, creating massive plantations, and with them, a large class of landless rural workers. That gap between the rich and the poor, it just got wider and wider with every single harvest.
So all these simmering tensions finally boiled over in the 1940s. The president, Rafael Calderón Guardia, who was actually a member of the elite, teamed up with the Catholic Church and the Communist Party to push through some absolutely stunning social reforms. We're talking a national social security system, a modern labor code. To the workers, this guy was a hero, but to the coffee barons, he was a traitor to his class.
By the time the 1948 election rolled around, the country was basically a powder keg. So when the opposition candidate, Atilio Ulate, actually won, the ruling party just refused to accept it. They used their control of Congress to simply annul the election. For one charismatic coffee farmer named José Figueres Ferrer, that was it. That was the last straw. He launched a revolution.
The war was incredibly short, just 44 days, but it was absolutely brutal. For a country that really prided itself on its peaceful nature, it was the bloodiest event of its entire 20th century. Over 2,000 people died. It scarred a whole generation.
In that trauma, it led directly to the climax of this whole story, because the winner, José Figueres, didn't just win a war. He decided to completely end the very institution that he believed made those kinds of wars possible in the first place.
On this day, just a few months after his victory, Figueres made a choice that would go on to define Costa Rica forever.
He went to the Army's headquarters, the Bella Vista Barracks. And in this incredibly powerful public ceremony, he grabbed a sledgehammer and he started smashing down one of its walls. He was literally, physically, dismantling the armed forces.
And this was his revolutionary promise. The fortress would become the new National Museum. The money that was once spent on soldiers and rifles would now be invested in teachers and schools. It was just this unilateral act of disarmament, a declaration that Costa Rica's future would be secured not by force, but by knowledge.
So what do you do with a peace dividend? Well, you build. Figueres' revolutionary government, which they called the founding junta of the Second Republic, got to work redesigning the entire state from the ground up.
And here's how all those pieces just clicked into place. The new Constitution of 1949 made abolishing the army permanent. That money they saved was poured into a genuine welfare state. creating powerful new institutions for electricity and for housing. Women finally gained the right to vote, and the Afro-Caribbean population received full citizenship. And get this, when an invasion actually did come in 1955, they defended themselves not with a standing army, but with a citizen militia and international law. They had really, truly chosen a different path.
So when you look at it, the story of Costa Rica isn't really one of perfect, uninterrupted peace. It's a story of making radical choices at these super critical moments to survive poverty, to manage brand new wealth, and in the end, to bet its entire security on an ideal. Now, the nation faces modern challenges, of course, like inequality and corruption, but its history leaves us with this really compelling question. Having made such bold choices in the past, what will be its next?